Your hand will hold me still, even when my world is shaking. Your hand will hold me still. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm fearfully and wonderfully
Good evening and welcome to Theology Chat with Chumpy. It is Tuesday night, so it's time for our weekly chat, and it is cold. It was snowing today, and I am not ready for the cold weather. That's all. So, what is Theology Chat? Other than me complaining about it being cold already, what we do is each Tuesday night we try and take a look at what we usually do is look at some of the theological concepts behind the sermon on Sunday. We try to define some terms, answer any questions, and just try to explain things a little break it down a little better. Normally that's what we do, and we answer any questions that came up from the sermon on Sunday or that come up tonight. But what we're doing with this Moses series, because and Melissa talked about this on Sunday, like we are covering a lot of material in a relatively short amount of time, and so like we can't hit every part of the story. So what I'm trying to do on Tuesday nights is I'm trying to fill in a couple maybe parts of the story that we miss, just because we don't have time. And so I'm gonna be doing some of that tonight, because we just don't have time to get it all in on Sunday morning. So that's what we're doing. We talked on Sunday. Let's see, this is our 5th week of the series, and so last week we talked about the parting of the Red Sea, and then this week we talked about the giving of the 10 Commandments, and then people of Israel, as they're getting the 10 Commandments, building this golden calf. So that was what Sunday was about. But in the process of getting from the Red Sea to Mount Sinai, where they got the 10 Commandments, hi Dad, there was a lot of stuff that happened. So I'm going to try and touch on a couple of those stories, one of which Pastor Melissa kind of alluded to in her sermon, and that is when the Israelites went out from the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, as we talked about last week. They went towards Mount Sinai. This is a dry, deserty area, and so there's not a whole lot of vegetation. There's not a whole lot of water sources. There are oases. I think that's the way you say it out there occasionally. And so there's places where you can stop to get food and water, but they're kind of few and far between. And so it's kind of like the people who are in caravans out there that would be traveling these areas, they know where these spots are, and so that's why there's roads along certain areas. But the people of Israel are kind of wandering their way towards Mount Sinai, and so they get out there and they're running low on food, and so they start grumbling to Moses. And what they say to him, let me pull that up here. They get out in the desert and they say to Moses, in the desert, The whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve the entire assembly to death." If you're seeing a theme here, you're not wrong. They get to the Red Sea and they say, "Oh, woe is me. You brought us out here to get us killed. But we not have enough graves in Egypt." So then they get past the Red Sea. Now they're saying, "Oh, woe is us. You brought us out here into the desert where there's no food." There is a theme. Israel has this bad habit of complaining to God. God provides. Then they wind up complaining about something else. And we can't give them too much flack for it because we do the same thing. So that's what they're saying to Moses. We need some food, and that's a fair thing to ask for. I mean, you got to eat. So Moses then, I got notes all over the place here, so I'm trying to bounce back and forth between them. Moses goes to God, and the Lord tells Moses, he says, "I've heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." And so that evening quail came and covered the camp, and in morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Now, this is what we call manna. The little flakes on the ground, they collect all that stuff, and then they're able to eat that. Manna is literally Hebrew for "what is it?" Like, they didn't know what it was, but it was edible, and so it filled them. They were given this stuff. God provided this stuff for them to eat to sustain them as they went on. But he gave them the manna with the instructions that you collect enough for that day. You don't collect extra. You don't go out and start hoarding this manna. You go out and get the stuff that you need for that day, for you and your family, and then you eat it that day. That was the instructions they were given. Now, on the sixth day, you can collect enough for that day and the next day, because the seventh day is the Sabbath day. So that was the only exception. God provided this stuff for them. They collected the stuff. But of course, there were some people that were like, "Well, this might not show up tomorrow morning. I'm going to collect more of it," despite what God told them. So they collected more, and it tells this. I'm kind of paraphrasing a bunch of stuff here because I got to get through tonight too. So they collected more, thinking, "Well, this might not be here tomorrow," or I don't know, maybe I'm going to invite some friends over and we'll have a big party of manna. I don't even know what you make with manna. Anyway, so they collected extra, but then the next morning, the stuff had rotted and it had maggots in it and it stunk. That's literally what the Bible says. It stunk, it had maggots in it, and it had rotted. So that's what they get for not following the instructions, basically. And so Moses was mad because, I mean, obviously you walk around camp, people's tents are smelling. You know who took the extra manna. So God provides this manna, but he only provides enough for that day. And then the next day, more shows up. And then the next day, more shows up. But again, you have to take what you need for that day. And then on the sixth day, you take the extra to cover for the seventh. And then that day, that manna, the Bible says, did not spoil overnight. And they were able to eat it on the Sabbath day. Now, all of this is an important, so much of this Exodus story that we're reading, that we're learning about on Sunday mornings, we're talking about on Tuesday nights. So much of this Exodus story is like foundational stories of the identity of the people of Israel. Like, this is like who the people of Israel are. And so then later on, when Jesus comes on the scene, these are the people that Jesus is going to. Okay, And Jesus goes to them and they say, Lord, teach us how to pray. Okay, and so Jesus goes and teaches them to pray. And in his prayer, he says, give us, Lord, our daily bread. Right? And so when the people of Israel had heard that, they would have probably immediately thought of the manna that God had provided for them in the desert, or provided for their ancestors, I should say, in the desert. And they would be reminded, God provided it every day. It was there. But he only provided enough for that day. And so Jesus is saying, God, provide us or give us our daily bread. So we don't go looking for all the extras. We go picking up what we need for the day, and then we trust God to provide for the next day. And so on and so on and so on. And that's kind of what Jesus is talking about there with the daily bread. It's a daily trusting God with our sustenance and our being able to sustain us. So that's that story of and then the quail. The quail showed up. I wasn't going to go into that too much, but I'm just remember, this is a huge group of people, and so God's providing meat for all these people. That's a lot of quail, and I'm just picturing like all these birds flying into camp and just sort of landing, and like the chaos that would have been really entertaining to watch. But I'm not going to go into that too much. So then the Israelites go a little further on in the story here. They get deeper into the desert and they are running low on water. And so I'm going to read a section again from Exodus. It says, the whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. Moses replied, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test? But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst? Here we go again. There's their thematic complaint. Then Moses cried out to the Lord, what am I to do with these people? They're almost ready to stone me. The Lord answered Moses, go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Horeb, again, we talked about this several weeks back. Mount Horeb is another name for Mount Sinai. And so the book of Exodus kind of interchanges the two, almost like it assumes that that they're the same place. Where was I? I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb, strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink. So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the place Massa and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? So here's another case of the people having a real need. I mean, you got to have water, but again, how do they bring that request to Moses, and how do they bring that request to God? They start complaining and grumbling and setting themselves up against them. And so what does God do? He tells Moses, take the staff, hit this rock, and God provides another miracle where water starts flowing out of the rock. There is, obviously we talked about previous weeks where we don't know where this happened as far as where Mount Sinai is, where a lot of these stories happened, but there is a sorry, I'm trying to pull some pictures together here real quick. I didn't think to put in earlier. There is one of the potential places, if you remember, we talked about there are several places that they think Mount Sinai might be. And I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I thought it was cool, so I'm going to share it. This is what I get for trying to talk and click at the same time. There is a rock formation, or a split rock, that is at the let me stop talking for a second and get that set up. There we go. Okay. One of the locations that they think Mount Sinai might be is Jabal al-Lawz, which is on the eastern side of the Gulf of Aqaba. At that site, there is a rock that they've found, and again, I don't know that this is the place, but I think it's cool. There's this rock that they found there, and they call it Massa and Meribah because they think this could possibly be the rock that Moses struck, and then it split, and this is where the water came out of. We don't know, but that's cool. So Moses does this. Now, interestingly, Moses calls this Massa and Meribah, this place, and the reason for that is it might be, Dad. My dad's asking, is this the place where Moses got in trouble for striking it twice? But this might be the same place, but this isn't the time that he gets in trouble for doing that. This time he's following the directions. But he does call this place Massa and Meribah, which Massa means testing. So they're kind of testing God out here by saying, you got to take care of us better. And Meribah means quarreling. So they're quarreling with Moses and with God. So that's what Moses calls this place. So moving on from there. So they're in this area now, and they're kind of camped out waiting for God to tell them where to go, what to do, and all that. And they come under attack by these people called the Amalekites. They're from the area of area or people group Amalek. I'm not sure on that one. But they come under attack. And so the Israelites marshal their forces, they go out to fight them, and things are going poorly. And then things are going well, and it's kind of an up and down battle. And they notice that whenever Moses is raising his hands over the battle, the Israelites are winning. And then when his hands drop down, that's when the Israelites start losing. So the people who are with Moses are like, well, we got to keep them hands up. So they come along. Moses gets tired, so they bring along this rock for him to sit on, and then he still can't hold his hands up. And so they're like, okay, fine, we're going to hold your hands up. So they stand on either side of him, hold his hands up, and the Israelites win the day. I guess that it was Moses giving his blessing to the people of Israel, and God working through that. Just a quick part of the story there that we weren't able to spend much time on. While they are in that area, also Jethro shows up. Now, if you don't know who Jethro is, don't worry about it because we didn't talk about him a whole lot. Jethro is actually Moses' father-in-law. He's from the area of Midian, which is that area east of the Gulf of Aqaba. And so they're in this region, and so Jethro shows up. I guess they heard they were in town. So Jethro comes out to see his son-in-law. And so Moses is talking to him, kind of giving him the lowdown on what it's like to try and lead these people. And so Moses is having to hear all these people's disputes and all these... he's kind of being a judge over top of the entire people of Israel. Now remember, this is 600,000 some men, plus women, plus children, and all the troubles that come along with them. And so he's trying to manage this. And Jethro comes along and he gives him a little bit of leadership advice. He says, look, you can't do this all by yourself. you need to appoint people that God has entrusted to you, um, to kind of take care of this and take care of that and take care, and then let them do the work, and then, or do some work, and then they report to you, and then you can kind of oversee them. So basically, Jethro is giving him advice on how to lead the people. And Moses takes that advice and sets up people to take care of different tribes, and things go a little bit smoother. And so all of this is happening prior to, I would have to double check the timeline on that, but it's happening prior to the Mount Sinai encounter, where God gives them the Ten Commandments. And so they eventually get to Sinai, or they go up on Sinai. Moses goes up on Sinai. He gets the Ten Commandments, comes down, and Pastor Melissa was talking about this on Sunday. While he had been up there, they built this golden calf and started worshiping it. And I cannot imagine the frustration that Moses had coming down the mountain and seeing what was going on. Like that, it boggles my mind, like how frustrated he must have been at that. Well, so frustrated that he took the tablets that God had created and threw them and broke them on this altar. Like they had completely corrupted themselves while he was going out to meet God. So, but I'm not going to talk about that because Melissa talked about it all on Sunday. But throughout this section of the Bible that we read here, it's kind of thrown in before, during, and after this whole Moses encounter with God on Sinai, the making of the bull, and Moses coming down and destroying the bull, is God giving instructions, rules, laws for the people of Israel. It's kind of interspersed all through here. It's like, here's some law, here's a little bit of story, here's some law, here's a little bit of story. And what's going on here is, this is a brand new people. Like, these people were slaves of Egypt for 400 years. Before that, they were nomads that had wandered out of from kind of the Persia area. They had wandered to Canaan and then had become slaves. And so these are a new people. These are a new nation. And so God is kind of laying out here, like, this is what it's going to be like for you to be my people and for me to be your God. My people are going to be something different than this country or these people. Like, the way you are to be as my people is to be different from this people group, And so we're seeing a lot of stuff thrown in there where God is saying things that sometimes they don't make sense to us. And I think some of that has to do with the cultural difference. We are not in that culture. And so some of that may have been reaction to neighboring cultures. And so when we hear about God saying, well, you can't, I don't want you wearing clothes that is of mixed oh, I'm blanking on the word, fabrics. So you can't have a cotton polyester blend. That doesn't make sense to us. Well, stuff like that may be related to the dress that is worn by another, worn in the worship of another god. Okay? And so that's like iconic of that type of worship. And so God is telling his people, like, I don't want you to have anything that resembles the worship of these other gods. Okay? And so that's a lot of, not a lot, but some of, at least, the laws that we find as he's giving these laws and rules to people. Also, a lot of it has to do with like just what it means to be the people of God. And so that's really a lot of what the Ten Commandments is about. Pastor Melissa talked about that on Sunday, is the first four talk about what it means to love God. And the last six, I should say, talk about what it means to love each other. And then, of course, Jesus comes along later and says, these are the two greatest commandments, to love Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. That's the essence of all the law and the prophets, is to love God and to love other people. And that's what God wants for his people. And so that's what God is trying to get through to the people through all these laws, through all the rules, through all the teaching them how to be a people who follows God, teaching them how to interact with God, because they've never been in interaction with God. They come up to the mountain and they see like what is going on there, and they're like, whoa, 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 Moses, you going up there? We don't want to have anything to do with this. So, I mean, they don't even know how to interact with God. And so that's what this is all about. Now, a part of one piece of the instructions that God is giving them has to do with the tabernacle. Now, this happens after Mount Sinai, and so I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm fairly certain that Pastor Melissa is not going to talk about it, so I'm going to go ahead and slide it in here. God gives instructions on what to set up for the tabernacle. Now, what the tabernacle is a place for them to worship God as they're moving around. It's kind of a mobile temple. Okay, here's a graphic of it. This was something I found online. I'm a visual person, so enjoy the pictures. But this is kind of a diagram of what the tabernacle would have looked like. You had this outer enclosure, and then inside of there you had all the tables and the altar and the things that were needed for the sacrificial worship. And so all that stuff was inside the enclosure, but inside that was the temple that they had constructed, or that they would construct. And that had inside of that the Ark of the Covenant, the veil that they had in there that separated the temple from the Holy of Holies, which was the innermost area. And so all that stuff, they had this as they were wandering the desert. Okay? And it was really a predecessor of what, when they got to Jerusalem, the first time that they built the temple, like this was like what that bit was based off of, was this tabernacle. And so this was all outlined. God explains all this, gives very detailed instructions to the people about how this is to be set up. And you see God giving instructions to pull people from all kinds of different walks of life to be included in the construction of this tabernacle. So you've got different weavers. You have to pull in these weavers because they're going to be making this veil and these tents. You got to pull in the carpenters to build these tables, and he gives them instructions about what kind of wood to use for this. You got to pull in the metalsmiths so that they can create this altar and the ark. And it's all through there. God is like pulling people in from every part of the people of Israel to say, okay, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, and you to do this. And everybody is involved in making this. And it's kind of a picture of God's kingdom where he has people from all walks of life. And if you remember, the Apostle Paul says, he compares the church to a body. And a body has an ear, a body has an eye, a body has a pinky toe. And every body part has its own purpose and has its own job. and we need all the body parts to be a functional person. And it's kind of a picture of that, where God's saying, you know, we need to have all these people because this is who the people of God are. It's not just these people, it's all of us. And so that's kind of a cool picture that he of the kingdom of God, the people of God, and how he's constructing the tabernacle and how he's instructing them to construct the tabernacle. And so that's, again, all of this stuff, I kind of breezed over a lot of this stuff because even with the extras, like, there's a lot of stuff in there to cover. So that's all I'm going to get to this week. Next week, we're moving closer to the promised land. Not quite in yet, but we're continuing the story. And so I will see you next Sunday and then Tuesday night again. Everyone, please stay safe. Again, we are, if you didn't hear the announcement on Sunday, we are still doing 10:30 in-person service. We are streaming to the TV out front, so there's people can sit out front as well to kind of break up the number of people. But if you don't feel safe, if for any reason, please stay home, watch the live stream, stay safe. And because of being able to stream out to the TV out front, we aren't going to be doing the Sunday night service as of next week. So just in case you didn't hear that announcement on Sunday, there is no Sunday night service. We are all doing the 10:30 a.m. service, but we can split between the front and the back rooms. So that is just an announcement I want to make sure everybody heard. And I will see you all next week.